In this series, we'll be discussing about how some of our projects come to life and having a bit of a deep dive about how creativity works at Rhapsody. Welcome to the Rhapsody Debrief. So we're here to talk about the Brother project and everything that went before it and everything that we're working on with them now and looking into the future of them. So let's get to it and let's talk about it. We know what the problem is, but now it's time to think about what's the solution.
The first thing I remember was you and I were in the office and the team started already working on first concepts. And we were a bit far off of what those concepts were actually going to be. I remember looking at them and we're like, oh, we're focusing too much on the problem. I remember quite clearly we sat down, you and I and the other creative director, to just look at it and be like, okay, we need fresh ideas. This is not it.
A company comes to you like Brother with a problem or something they need a solution for. It's easy to focus on the problem as the reason why you're then building a creative narrative around it. And actually, it's not the thing you need to focus on. You need to focus on what the solution is.
Exactly. And I think it was also to be able to show as an agency the variety of ideas that we come up as a solution to that. We always present a little bit of like that approach of like a really safe idea, something in the middle, and something much, much riskier.
The Goldilocks routine.
I know. We love that. And I think that's something I really enjoyed at that part of the process.
We only found out afterwards that we were against 17 agencies. It makes it even more of a win for us to know that we were up against that much competition. We come up with some ideas. We pitched 3 or 4 ideas, which is, standard practice when you're trying to pitch on something. And none of those ideas were the final idea. But what was really interesting is that Brother, as the client, said, we really like how you think about this. We really like Rhapsody's thought process, the way in which you approach the creative solution to the project.
That's something for us from the beginning, was that trust from them. I think winning that client trust always takes time, and then they saw that, and we understood quite quickly the task in hand. We had a lot of workshops with them.
A lot of workshops. One of the workshops that we did with them was to find out about their analytics, and that's really interesting in terms of what we can learn from it. And I was wondering, do you remember how that was helpful or what we learned from that analytics workshop?
Well, for me, it was my favorite workshop, but that's the strategist in me. And I think it was one of the parts that really fed our creative. Them as a marketing team, they had a lot of insights. It's one of the most insightful workshops I've had in my career, where it was really detail orientated about each of their audiences, each of the SKUs. They knew what was the challenge, and the challenge was they only had 3% market share in the whole US in inkjet printers, which was really little. And they knew that they were competing with really big names in the industry. I think the original list of personas was like around 12 personas, really different, really varied ages. We know the struggle of younger ages printing at home. That's not something that people tend to do. We know that they wanted to talk to a good range of people and diversity. And in the US market, it's a really wide market as well. So for me, that was not only insightful, was fun for us to then after think of how we were going to come up with the different narratives.
It was really a key part of the whole creative process there on forth from that, which was that we had this persona information, we had this analytics that come from Brother, and it really clearly pointed towards a connection between the products that they were trying to sell, the campaign that they needed to produce, and then the target audience of that campaign. So using all of that information, it really started to gel together this idea of, okay, so let's match each of these personas to each of the products. But we're telling the story of what these printers can do to enable those people, those particular personas.
I remember quite a lot about the first persona that was the sprinter persona.
I think that was one of the key moments of wordplay. And for me personally, and I think at Rhapsody something we do a lot, is we focus on the copy to start with, because it unlocks so much about what the rest of the campaign means. You always want to try and get that moment of that smile in the mind aspect of somebody just initially engaging with the creative and being like, oh, I get it, I get that, that's an important thing for me, that makes sense to me, that's funny to me, that's done something, therefore I'm going to engage with the rest of the creative. And for us, that initial point was the sprinter, someone who needs to print something fast. One of the main kind of selling points behind one of the product models was fast printing. And then when we saw that, we can put together this simple bit of wordplay where we have a sprinter, it's got the print word in it, we can do something with that. That's when it starts to like go forward. And obviously the rest of the personas were based on that same model of like, okay, how can we then take the wordplay here and apply it across the 4 different models and the 4 different personas? When we first started working with Brother, they were saying, we want you to push us. We're quite safe. What we're doing at the moment isn't working in the way that we want it to. So we want you to kind of like push the envelope a bit, make it a bit more exciting, a bit more creative, which is great when you have that and you hear that at the start of a project. But obviously they are the people they are, and they are the company they are, and they're used to doing things the way that they do them. So when you do start to recommend these ideas that are a little bit out there for them, a little bit extra for them, there's obviously going to be a bit of pushback. They're a bit worried about it. Legal departments get involved, people from outside of the kind of circle of collaborators that you have. So an example of that would be even the tagline we came up with for the campaign, which was "Brother like no other." Now, for us, it made a lot of sense because we're talking about these individual types of people and these individual types of products and how they fit together. We obviously like the little alliteration and the rhyming of "brother like no other." But for them, straight away, they were like, I don't know if we can say that we're like no other. It has this kind of uniqueness to it. I'm not sure if it will go with the legal team. So it was kind of put on the back burner for a bit. And when I say for a bit, the whole project. But then it ended up coming back right at the end. And we was like, actually, no, this is better than what we have at the moment. Can we try it with the legal team again? At that stage, when we'd built up all of the creative and the narrative behind it, I think they were like, actually, yeah, no, it does make sense, it fits, and I think we can use it.
One of the things of us is that we're quite agile, and I hate sitting into waiting for things to be approved or anything. I'm like, okay, let's get started. And for us was, okay, how can we find a right partner to make this faster? We knew we will do all of the campaign, all the delivery, all of the creative from a Rhapsody perspective, but we needed a production partner. And I think for us was that vetting process of finding who was the right partner. And I think we discussed with 3 other agencies and productions who would be best. And I think as soon as I met with Tom from Dojo and Sophie, it was an instant click from my side of like, these guys get it. They understand tech, they understand video production, and they understand speed.
Work with Sophie and Tom at Dojo in order to make sure from a production point of view, this is all doable and it can go ahead. And they were magic when it came to that part of the process. And also the director Grant, and working with him as well, because he helped us a lot in terms of taking those 4 stories that we had and weaving them into one narrative, which is essentially what we needed as the hero element of the campaign. This broadcast quality video that showed all 4 of the personas in one 60-second ad. I think it'd be really good for us to kind of talk to Grant a bit about that and find out some more about the process and how it went.
What can we take from each one of these different personas and bring together to make a hero film feel cohesive?
We're here with Grant. Grant, you were the director on the video and on the project. So it's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. Maybe you could talk a little bit about when we first joined and we first started collaborating, like what made it feel like aligned? What made it feel like a collaborative process between us?
I think it just felt very much like you knew what you wanted, and that is always really helpful because you're starting from a great position. You had this really thorough Figma board which outlined these 4 different personas, and they were going to be our 4 protagonists in our film. The smarter, thinker, multitasker and sprinter. The challenge was you had these really succinct 30-second outlines for adverts, but you also wanted a combined 60-second ad. What can we take from each one of these different personas and bring together to make the film, a hero film, feel cohesive?
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the biggest challenges, and I think that's one of the key areas where you had a really positive impact on the first initial calls that we had.
Putting the 4 videos into one was like a sort of jigsaw puzzle, I suppose. And it was a lot of, you wouldn't have seen this, but on my end, it was a lot of sort of trial and error and taking different stills from the storyboard you'd created and adding in some of my own. My job is always about translating what the audience will take in from the visuals, and if it's enough information or if it's too little. The films start off in reality, in a real world that's meant to feel relatable, and then they are magically transitioned into this printer world, but all of them have a unique and different printer world that relates to them. So I suppose the jigsaw is sort of which character comes first that establishes that tone, and then when you see the next visual of the printer world that the audience understands okay, we're still in this world. I think we started off by trying to sort of show each character in their sort of real world scenario, but then we were able to, for iteration, establish that actually just showing one character was enough.
Well, talking of one character, like obviously we had the 4 storyboards at the start. Is there a particular storyboard that kind of sticks out to you that you remember as like the key, or maybe like the ignition point of like the project, and you saw it and you thought, okay, I can see where this is going?
But the sprinter persona was the one I was most excited about, but also was trepidatious about because, you know, a lady running in a printer world on a running machine, and then there'd be swirling paper around. I knew instantly that was going to be quite a VFX challenge. And there was a lot of discussion over, like, you know, could we do elements of that practically or do it in post?
I remember us having a leaf blower on set and
Yeah.
A4, and we were chucking them up, and it sort of worked, but then we were like, I think this is more of a VFX solution.
Paper and wind and things floating is always complicated, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think they all had their sort of merits and challenges. The sprinter was the most striking visually because of the flying paper. But the smarter character, their entire world had to be built by VFX. We needed to sort of represent data in a printer world way, ultimately.
I liked the Thinker one personally.
You know, I studied architecture, so I really related to the Thinker character because they became this designer and it felt very relatable to me. But I loved the real world location that we chose for them. I was very adamant that I wanted to change the window there to be a circular window, which is like a little touch, but it just added that extra layer of design to their space. It was a really exciting prospect to figure out how this designer character could translate a grayscale world into something that was vibrant and colourful.
I think that's something you helped us out a lot with, actually, in terms of practically what could we do in camera to get that across.
The thing is that you have a storyboard and it's beautiful and it's very clear, but you need to turn it into practical reality. And also, you know, the thing that the storyboard never has is motion. I love this idea of following them on a journey into this situation. Ultimately involved having a Steadicam tracking with them and figuring out the logistics of the moves, but we had to establish a sort of colourless, drab-looking situation and those moments of impact. You know, it felt powerful that instead of it being a swish of a hand or, you know, a wipe or something, that they physically touch something, and that sort of tactile touch would motivate the colour change. They put the hand on the armchair and swiped the hand across the sofa, and then they came to this vase that was dull and white, and they this was quite a cool practical effect ultimately, where they just sort of turned it round. We cut on that twist to make it turn from something that was not that inspiring to something way more inspiring, and sort of seeing the final situation with the confetti at the end was just like the icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that tactility as well talks to the whole ethos of like print as well. So having that tactility as part of it, I think, speaks into that part as well. Maybe we can also talk about then Multitasker as well. So Multitasker was the 4th persona that we covered. So this was the idea is to get like a bit of a printer that does everything, and how to kind of represent that in this fantasy way. So we come up with this idea of, you know, this guy who's got multiple hands, he can do lots of things at once.
We had to film lots of different plates and their hands doing different things, keeping the actor in a very static position, and film it a lot wider so that in post, you know, sort of have this time-lapse effect where lots of things are happening and it's sweeping across. You know, that was one of my favourite moments, seeing the VFX come to life. The moment where the hands pop out and the actor just moves a little bit and all the hands sort of move with him, it just like really sells that idea.
I wonder, is there a point in the project, and you know, it could have been later on in the project, where you felt that actually, you know, the concept is really coming through now, and I feel like everything's aligning, and we know what goal we're aiming for, and we know exactly where we're heading?
Rhapsody had a really amazing storyboard that was very clear, and it's just adding those little touches on so that I understand it, and then also talking the client through it. Finding the location was key, and when we found that location that had lots of deep, rich colour in most of the rooms, it all came to life for me because I could see practically where it would be, you know, where the workplace and the desk was for these people, where the printer would be. A lot of the filming in the studio was thinking about what would come afterwards in post.
Yes, which is always a risk, right, on the day, like when you're on a film set and you're discussing things and you go, and you start hearing people go, oh, we would do that in post, and you go, oh yeah, we're going to have to do that in post. And then you think, oh, how much of this can we get in camera versus how much of this is going to be on the editor and the VFX. And, luckily, we got everything we needed to. But I always feel wary of hearing that on set. And I'm like, oh, no, we do it in post. I'm like, okay, that's another thing we're going to have to do later on.
What was the moment where it sort of translated for you?
Whole process of us being like, okay, we need to get the storyboard in front of the client. And I was like, we had, I don't know, however many other projects on as well. And I was like, Grant has come through with this and he's absolutely smashed it. And you were like, because you were doing it in InDesign as well. And I was like, yes, man of my culture.
You'd shared those Figmas with them?
Well, we'd present them with them. And later on they had access to the Figma. So the client was in there, literally commenting on the Figma and making things clear or saying yes to this, no to this, more down this way, less down that way.
One of the things we had to do was to clarify what the printer world would look like. I think that was quite a big sort of decision. Yeah. Because I was looking at the references that I put forward, it could have been quite a white world, or there was even an idea where it was a bit like, 2001 A Space Odyssey, where there's the monolith in there. So we could have used that to represent the printer.
Yes.
But ultimately we went for this world that was very dark with hints of blue that linked to the brand, but also could be ambiguous in all the different situations.
Yeah, we wanted it to feel like you say, a bit dreamy, a bit fantastical. I think fantastical was actually the word that kept coming up in the storyboard. We're like, this needs comments on it. This needs to be fantastical. But like you say, ambiguous enough that you can believe this is a dream sequence or this is like a fantasy sequence. But it sort of also feels like you're inside the printer in a way. One
of my favourite bits was figuring out how we transition from the real world to the printer world. Obviously, it became really clear to sort of push in towards the printer, but I really wanted to add this little twist to it, just to sort of, not like an upside down, like Stranger Things type thing,
but like a reality shift or something.
Adding that twist, while subtle, really sort of conveys the idea of what's happening, and then going from upside down to the correct orientation really sort of crystallised that you were going from the real world to the printer world. I had so many chats with the VFX artist, Harry, which then I didn't share with you guys, but there were so many different iterations of going through the printer.
Yeah, I can imagine.
At one point, we could really clearly see what was being printed, or the journey was quite short. It wasn't quite right to start with.
To be honest, I'm surprised we didn't have more, almost like pushback from Brother on like, oh no, this is not what the inside of the printer looks like. When you're traveling through, it's them trusting us to make sure it looks, unreal enough that it's part of the story. Yeah. And it's just part of the imagination behind the whole concept. And we do this red herring at the end where for the different characters, there's this moment of, actually, was that real or did that actually happen or not? Maybe we can talk a little bit about that and how we kind of like connected that narrative through the different personas and how we can kind of have a bit of fun with that end part.
They have their moment of magic in the printer world where their solutions are solved and they sort of have that creative spark. Something I loved was when they came out of the printer world. We wanted to have this cheeky, witty moment where a bit of the printer world had continued into the real world.
Yeah, it sort of leaked into the reality that they have.
With the Thinker, there's this epic end moment in the printer world of the confetti, and then we just came to this idea that he could just have a little bit of confetti left on his head, like as if was that real or did that actually happen? The smarter character, she's been in this data world in the printer world, which she sees that little bit of glint of data in her glasses. In the printer world, the sprinter's been literally sprinting. Yeah. So it was really fun to work with the actor to have that moment where she was sort of out of breath and her hair was dishevelled because before it was all perfect. Well, with the Multitasker, we meet him in a place where it's sort of organised chaos on his desk and he's running a business from home, but it was really fun to capture the reaction of that desk being clean and everything in his life being organised at the end.
Do you have a favourite of the 4 endings?
The funniest ending for me is the sprinter one because, she was out of breath and we could really play on the emotions there, but I loved the confetti and the looks that we created with the Thinker.
I think the confetti one, you get that sort of look to camera almost where he picks it out and he's like, that sort of like tweak of his head and when he shows that emotion, that's where I think that captures really nicely like what the narrative is. It's like, hang on a minute, did that actually just happen?
The most impactful one was the Thinker because we used that in the 60-second hero one.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So it had that relatability because I think probably he was the only one that brought something physical back from the printer world.
Yes, yeah.
We had a great team and a really great cinematographer and production designer, and it was really amazing to see how we could go from a place where we had these storyboards with mock visuals and references and how we actually brought that to reality. we spent 2 days in the studio, and we had to create this big lighting rig above and these intricate ways of how we could create the printer world behind each character. And then we had some really technical moments with green screen. We had a VFX supervisor there as well that would be giving notes on, you know, what could happen and what couldn't and what was going to cause problems later down the line. You know, the practical reality of unleashing thousands of bits of confetti in the air and then cleaning that up to go for another take. Yeah.
No, it's great. I think the whole production team were amazing to work with. Like, from a creative direction point of view, when you're looking at it and you're thinking about what's happening in screen, and then you start to wonder, okay, that one's in, what's next? And you turn around to go and think about it, or you look at your storyboard, and before you know it, you know, the whole production team have started moving on to the next set, and they're absolutely on it, and it's fantastic. We had the client on set as well, and I think it's really great from our perspective that we had built up that level of trust with them, that, you know, we discussed where we were going to film it. Obviously, the client's US based, we're in the UK, and they agreed to come to the UK to film it.
It wasn't just filming, there was photography taking place as well. There's a lot of organisation that goes into figuring out the jigsaw puzzle of the shoot and the shoot day and what's most practical. We also had a set build. You know, one of the locations, the yoga studio, we built. I thought it looked amazing.
It looks great, yeah, it looked fantastic. I think, the art department were fantastic on all of that, even putting like the circular window in and coming up with solutions for that, and everything from, you know, the DOP and everything that he brought to the project as well was fantastic. And I think everyone on set felt like a big collaboration. Everyone knew what was happening. The timing was perfect.
It was a really collaborative team, and the clients were really collaborative too. When everyone has the same vision and is on the same path and journey, when you add a note, which can be difficult, particularly during a production, but if it's right and if you're all aligned on it, then it's absolutely the thing.
Yeah, you can see the benefit, and you know that it's going to add to the end result.
Sometimes on the shoots, the clients are sort of in a room in the corner or up on a mezzanine, but it always felt reassuring calling out to them to ask them if they liked the shot. Or
did that go
right.
as you thought? Are you happy with that?
And get that call down from the mezzanine saying, yeah.
Luckily, a lot of thumbs up on the day.
Yeah, no, it was really good.
I loved it. It was one of the best projects that I've worked on based on that synergy.
We're going to be talking today about behind the scenes of how we both worked together on Brother. I know that it was a really successful partnership in both ends. What was for you like the biggest moving parts of the project?
When I first got the brief, I was like, this looks absolutely epic. I was like, this is so exciting, especially for me as a producer. I love having a big project that I can get my teeth stuck into. So I guess the first thing that we had to delve into was, okay, we've got these amazing storyboards, we've got this amazing creative, and then I put like my producer hat on and go, how do we do this? All in budget. Who do we need? What do we need? First point of call for me was like bringing in the creative director from a video perspective to break down the storyboards and the creative, which then would allow me to go, okay, this is the team that we need, and this is what we're going to need within budget. We've got a lot of sets to build because we were creating those 4 different stories, and then they were also going to be all coming together as one. So I was thinking, you know, how am I going to get this all done in a 1-day shoot, which then turned into a 2-day shoot, which was amazing. We managed to figure that out, and also working out the set builds. So I remember that we had like one studio day, and on that studio day, we had photography happening in one corner. So I had to find a space that would house photography and then a video shoot on like the green screen studio. Yeah. And then we made a whole other set to the left of the stage, which was going to be used throughout the day, because we couldn't build the set in front of the green screen because we needed those spaces. So we had 3 like set builds and spaces being used at the same time. So that's the kind of thing that I was thinking when this project came on, is like, how do I make this efficient? How do we create all the different spaces across this one studio day? And then obviously we had the second day, which was in the house, which again, being in a house is like super helpful because you can use the house and the physical walls. There's no painting flats or sets, but we still had like a lot of design to do for each character, and we had to make it look like 4
their own homes.
yeah, 4 different homes. So when we were looking for the location, we were like, okay, we need this to look like 4 different people's homes. So I'm talking to the art director. I'm like, how do we make this happen? Like, what can we do to like set dress it to look different? So yeah, that was like my initial sort of rolling mindset.
Yeah, I think from me as well, I think for us it's always like juggling that creative. We don't want to bring back creative. We always want that to flourish, but we're always telling them, but from a production perspective, how are we going to do this? And realistically, I think we came up with really good solutions. I know that one of the things that we needed to do was photography, as you mentioned, and for all the campaign, and that being like we need the same actors that we're going to be using, similar wardrobe. So it's like, okay, we could be doing this at parallel as when we're changing lighting in one set, an actor is not busy. So I think that also that build of the schedules was really important as well, of maintaining the running order of the day.
Whenever you're doing these things, as you know, like there's always something that goes wrong. There just always is. And everyone looks at you, they go, and you're like, okay, so this is my problem and I've got to now manage this. We had the printers on set, obviously. And there was a bit of a miscommunication to the art direction team. And we didn't realize that they were a US power pack. So we had to have like a conversion plug. And in the rush of putting everything together, I think one of the art director's assistants just like plugged in the printer and poof, no printer. And we were like, oh no. And there was a shot where it was like going into the printer. So the screen had to be lit up. We couldn't have, you know, the hero product not
working.
Yeah. And there was this little moment of like, I just don't want to create a panic, but we're going to have to figure something out. It was like solved very quickly. There's always a solution on set. So yeah, we figured that out. And I think something else that was happening that maybe you guys weren't even aware of, you know, I like to keep everyone happy on set, is the set build and the paint drying in time in order to build the yoga studio.
Yeah.
I remember the guys being like, we need to get into that studio the day before. And I was like, I don't have the money to get you in there like the day before. So we came up with like a little solution where it was like, okay, can you come in half a day before and just like paint, or bring the flats pre-painted? And he said, okay, I'll bring some of them pre-painted and then I will have to paint some stuff on site. I just have to. So I remember him being there just like frantically painting, the art director and the assistants, and they were like, it's going to be okay, it's going to be dry in time. And that actually made us flip the schedule. So when we spoke to him and he was like, hey, like this isn't going to be done in time, we rejigged the whole schedule for the day. So we like made that a little bit later so that could dry in time.
I didn't know this story. There you go. You were really well kept behind the curtain on that.
So yeah, it's always fun problem solving. But the thing is though, we've got such amazing teams, and like from your side as well, just a very high level of understanding of, don't worry, these things are going to be solved.
Yeah, I think from our side, like we have been in productions before. We know what it happens. We run our own productions as well to different scales and different territories. And I know that both of our teams, and I think that was something really great, was like we understood each other from the get-go. For me, it was one of the best things that happened. Was like how much in synergy both of our sides were. It felt that we were all working under one roof, and it was like we have the objective quite clear.
I loved it. It was one of the best projects that I've worked on based on that synergy. The other thing that was great collaborating with you guys is we were able to look at the creative beforehand, and Jamie wasn't particularly like precious. He wasn't, you know, offended when we were like, hey, we're just going to have to tweak this because we're not going to be able to fit that in budget. I think this is how we can come up with a solution. And I actually don't think there was many compromises made in the end, because instead of saying, no, we can't do that, we went, okay, we can do that, but we're going to use this solution.
That's so valuable from both of our sides. I think that's, we tend to as well to be like, let's put our solution hat on, instead of like, oh, we're going to just not think that this cannot be possible, or say no at all. Is can we do this on VFX? How much will be on VFX? How much time do we have for that section to be done? Because I know there was a lot of VFX that we had to work on.
Yeah.
But then other solutions that were like, no, we're going to do that on a camera. That needs to look this way. And that conversation of like solution-led lens was really important across the board. If I'm not wrong, the turnaround of this was quite quick. And I know the timeline, we were a bit on a scrunch.
Yes.
Of like, from the moment we were working on creative strategy at the beginning of the campaign, and then they told us, oh, we need the video in, I think, 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I do remember thinking, oh my God, this is going to be so tight. I think the pre-pro is a pretty rapid turnaround. I think there was a lot happening in tandem, like at the same time. Those types of turnarounds don't work unless you're all on the same page. For me, I'm choosing teams that will know and push back where needed of this can and can't be done. I have been on sets before where I've worked with art directors who will get on set and they will be overwhelmed, and there will be obviously like bitten off more than they can chew because they didn't push back. So that's the beauty of sort of the network that we have, is I know those people, I can trust them to be honest with me and transparent. And I think when you've got tight deadlines, transparency is 100% key.
Yeah, and I think to be able to have also that seniority and leadership of like, where am I going to say no? And say no to a client. Sometimes you need to have those hard conversations and be like, your budget stands here, our timeline is here, let's be realistic. We also want that success for you. How can we achieve that in a different way?
And it's the expectation setting. And it doesn't have to be a negative thing. I think there's some people and some production companies out there, or even just other producers or creative directors that I work with, and they're too scared to say no because there's been a mentality for a long time in production that's like the client's always right and you always say yes. But then you end up just hurting the client at the end of it, and also hurting your own brand because you get to the end and it's not achievable. So I definitely think that those expectation settings and saying no is a real powerful thing. And like I say, it doesn't have to be negative. You just have to say it in a lovely way and come up with amazing solutions.
That's the thing, is to come up with solutions, because I think you can say no and be like, quite, okay, this is your reality, but how can we make this in a different way? And it's that parallel thinking that you need to be having, and how can we frame? And sometimes becomes a better case than what our original idea was.
Yeah, and I loved that about you actually, and working with you in particular, because you would take my feedback on board, and there's always a little heart-sinking moment where you're like, right, I'm going to have to say this has got to happen this way. And it was never like, oh, for God's sake, Soph, like, seriously? It was like, okay, cool. I think that's a great solution, and like it will be put on the table. And yeah, we never really want to upset anyone, and we all want to be making amazing work. So it's a sort of a give-take relationship. So that was really valued for me.
That's good. I like to hear that. How did it feel like when we got the finished product?
When we finally had it done and we had that composed music laid down, which was like such back and forth, and it was just there, and we had the 4 different edits and the heroes, I was like, wow, like what an achievement. It's actually insane when you look at it and you think about all the different components, because this wasn't just a point and shoot. This was set, this was costume, wardrobe, this was, you know, painting things on the day and lugging things in and out of this house. So for me, I was pretty impressed with all of us. You know, I was just really proud of everything that we'd done and the time that we'd done it. And I actually remember the DP, Terence, coming to me, and he was like, this is like the most chilled set I've been on. Like everything was so relaxed. Like there was no one raising their voices. It was just, everyone knew what they were doing. It was a very well-oiled machine.
It speaks a lot about the type of teams we have built, both you guys and us, of like, we're not trying to burn out our teams. We're trying to have creativity first, and we're all looking for that like final great outcome. It seemed that we were all one single team. For us, it's also the client that we want to keep working with, and keeping that relationship, it's important. So yeah, I think we want more days like that on set, that it's like, oh, everybody felt that this was easy. Beautiful like dance between creative and strategy, that it happens at that stage, and that's when you see such a great result.
We've spoken about the creative concept, we've spoken about the production and making it real. Let's talk a little bit about the results and after the campaign. What do you think Brother was trying to achieve with this partnership and this campaign on the whole?
I think they had two main objectives. Of course, the first one, market share. We all want more, an increase of that. And the second one was pushing their creative farther of where they were at. And I think we achieved both of them. I know when we had the WhatsApp call with them, it was really exciting to hear from them being like, this is our best performing campaign we had in a long time. And it's also one of the favorites of their team and internally, and also from like the feedback we receive. It's always really rewarding as an agency when you go into a WhatsApp call to have such a collaborative and open discussion about results, and they were really happy with them. I also know that we're going to be working with them in the future as well, because that was a successful campaign. So I think that was really good for them, for us, and it's nurturing that relationship now.
Yeah, and it's always good, like I say, to have that positive feedback from the client and to know that you're going to work with them again in the future. It's affirming to know that, yeah, do you know what, we did a good job of this. Can we talk a bit about maybe where the ads ended up and where the creative ended up in terms of where would people actually see it?
This was an US campaign, so this went into streaming platforms like Hulu. We had, of course, organic, programmatic ads, all of the digital space. And then it went also on print in a lot of stores. So we had it on Walmart, we had it in Staples, Best Buy. So quite incredible to see overtaking a little bit of that in-store space in the US.
Yeah, there's a lot of like differences in minutiae as well, in like, oh, we need it to look exactly like this for Best Buy, and we need it to look exactly like this for this particular outlet. And you're like, okay, right, so we've got to do that this many times and in this many different formats. And actually it works out that once you get it complete and you've finished it and you feel really like satisfied with the whole of it. And I know that we had some pretty immense Figma files by the end of this that represented all of the different touch points that we had to produce the creative for. But like I said, it's really satisfying to see that all come together and see all the parts connected.
I remember one thing, we had to multiply everything by 4 because we had 4 different personas.
Yeah, we shot ourselves in the foot there.
Yeah. So it was just not only like hundreds of assets for all of the different reformats, but because we were looking at such a targeted audience, it was important for us to be able to do it for each of those personas and where they were going to be located. So
exactly,
a lot of hard work from the team.
A lot of hard work, but also it leads into a more successful campaign, right? Because you can then be really specific about where you're targeting. So they might have information about a particular shop and what particular type of people go there, or like what kind of printers get bought more. So we can say, okay, well, that ad with that persona is the most relevant one to place there. Therefore, really trying to nail down, okay, let's make this as effective as possible based on all of the creative and all of the information that we have behind the campaign.
I think it's that beautiful like dance between creative and strategy, that it happens at that stage, and that's when you see such a great result.
I think the size and scale of it also comes down to, what team do you have in place who can produce that much creative? And that's where it's like something I think our team should really be proud of themselves, because yes, we see the final video and we see the final result as this kind of broadcast quality 60-second ad. Yes, that's the crown jewel, we all love it, but there's so much more that goes behind that. There's months and months of conversations. There's every single banner ad times 4 because of the different personas, times however many because of the different shops and different positions and different places and different dimensions and different everything. So when you start to add up the numbers behind what gets put together, it's immense. And so from a team perspective, I think us at Rhapsody, we can be really, really proud of the effort that went into everything and how we delivered it all on time, on budget, achieving the goals that we did. I think it's immense.
Great work to the team.
Every agency wants that retainer client, or they want to be able to build a relationship where they have the history of what's come before and they know the information about the client, they know the information about the target audience, and then they can apply that on the next one. And so thinking about working with Brother again is really exciting for us, because we really enjoyed the collaboration we had with them on the previous campaign. And to be honest, we're just excited to take all of the learnings that we have from that campaign and apply it to the next one. I know that they asked us, can we push the envelope a bit more? Can we be a bit more creative? Can you challenge us a bit? And we did that, and now I kind of want to say, can we challenge you a bit more, and can we go a bit further, and can we do the next thing? So it's exciting to think about what we can do on the next time and how much we can push it that little bit further. And to be honest, it's exciting to work with the team again. Brother was a really, really wonderful place to collaborate, and we had lots and lots of meetings, but they were enjoyable meetings. They were good discussions, good creative discussions. When we have Dojo in as well and we add them to the mix, those discussions are even more fruitful. So it's really enjoyable to think about that happening again and what we could possibly achieve in the future.
Creativity starts with a conversation.
Absolutely.